Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pretend World's Real People. As always, I'm Tyler, and my voice is shot. I had a week of work, thankfully, but then I had a really intense exercise and acting class that I think just put my throat, my vocal cords, a little over the top. So now I'm sipping on some hot water and honey, hoping that all just goes away. But it sounds like it might be a little more radio worthy, which I'm not complaining about. Maybe just the pain. So I will make this intro quick. It has been a very productive week, sent in a lot of auditions, booked a few things that I'm really excited for. And then there are some really cool possibilities on the horizon that I'm very much looking forward to just exploring and kind of trying to manifest that. So yeah, it's just been really wonderful. Still looking for, the proper day job to pay the bills, but for right now, I'm happy with where I'm at. I hope everyone is having a great week. I hope you're excited for this episode because I am going back to my hometown as far as this interview goes. I'm talking to somebody who I will say has paved the way as far as working in various regions while still living outside of, the normal Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, Vancouver. And of course, I'm talking about the amazing Scott Takeda, who is an actor, filmmaker, photographer based here in Denver and has quite a few uh, pieces in his resume that stand out amongst anything else, especially for somebody who lives in this region. I mean, you may recognize him from Gone Girl, Dallas Buyers Club, Everything Must Go. He is in the newest National Treasure TV series on Disney Plus, and he's just continuously booking work and continuously improving himself. Not only that, he has his own coaching technique that he goes into with this episode, along with, where he came from, his upbringing, how he loved news from a young age and eventually became a reporter, and how that shifted into becoming an actor. It just, his story is really engaging, a lot of fun to listen to. He was a joy to have on the show, and I cannot wait to have him back in the future. It was just so much fun talking to somebody who is in the same region as myself, who has an expansive career and just continues to improve his craft every single day. So, without further ado, and so I can have a nice gulp of warm honey water, let's sit down for this interview and have a chat with Scott Takeda.
My name is Scott Takeda. Good morning, everyone. It's at least morning for me. If you can't tell from my early morning voice, it's not normally that low. And I am a visual storyteller, sometimes in front of the camera as a TV film actor, and sometimes behind the camera as a director.
Now, with that being said, when did your fascination, your passion for the visual, is that a cutie?
I'm meeting cuties right now.
He's taking care of his morning voice, everybody.
Yeah.
When did you get into cinema or filmmaking? Like, was it acting first? Was it filmmaking first? When did that start for you?
Wow. Well, way back when I was a little baby, um, I think as a child, I had a fascination with television news. Maybe an unhealthy fascination. I actually, way back in the day, I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and the local television stations at the time were out of Denver, and there was a particular television station called Channel 9. They called themselves 9 News. And I had perhaps a fanboy kind of crush, I guess, on the entire news team. Not necessarily in a romantic thing, but it's like I thought they were just the coolest people in the world. And that's kind of where it started. Is I probably as a 8 or 9 year old, I would ask my mother, "Mom, can I watch the news?" And so 5 o'clock, I would plant my little tushy in the chair right before the 19-inch television and watch 9 News and find out about all the stuff happening. Not even in my own community, because Fort Collins was about, it still is, about 70 miles to the north of Denver, and just found that world really fascinating. And, you know, went on to learn, hey, I guess I could work in that. So ended up, I ended up going a very strange route, because my in case you can't tell, I'm Asian, and so I think there was this. We're really going far back. There is this unsaid pressure to get careers in scientific fields. My dad being an engineer, my mother being an exercise physiologist. Um, and so I feel like I had this obligation to get a bachelor's of science degree. So I went initially into engineering, for electrical engineering. Ended up hating it, after deciding potentially to um, drop out from college. An inspiration happened that, hey, maybe I can get an internship at a TV station. So I got an internship at a different TV station, and was just like, okay, that's it. I'm doing this. And so I ended up getting a degree, and a bachelor's of science degree. I changed colleges, but it still was a bachelor's of science degree in journalism. That was a key conversation with my mom, is explaining to her that I was changing majors. She couldn't, it didn't matter to her. She didn't care. But in my mind, she did. And explaining to her, but it's still a bachelor's of science degree. She didn't care. But, in my mind, she did. And switched majors, and then started to work in journalism. And then that's kind of how I started to learn how to tell stories with pictures and sound.
Mm.
Very, very long explanation of a very simple question. So that's where it started.
Wow. Did you have any aspirations at that point when you had, gone through your internship, you were crafting these stories for the news, that you wanted to be on camera, or did you decide maybe I want to be on the more like producing side of it?
I only people in Denver of a certain age would remember this name. A gentleman by the name of Ed Sardella was the lead anchor of 9 News. And I was so thrilled in college that he was an adjunct professor. So I had a chance to take him for both an anchoring class and a news writing class. And Ed was a journalist with a capital J, like an old fashioned 1960s, 70s kind of journalist. And the first thing that he said is, it's not about you, it's about the story. So, yes, to answer your question, Tyler, I did have a desire to be a reporter or an anchor, to be in front of the camera. But because my coach, my teacher at the time, told us it's about the story first, I had this in my mind that it's kind of, just a second. I'm going to grab a prop. I'm going to grab a prop. I'll be right back. Just a second.
Okay.
All right. So just so you know, I was coached into the way that it's not about me standing in front of the camera with my microphone and my mic flag right here. interviewing people so I could be in front of the camera. And so to answer your question, Tyler, yes, I did want to be a reporter, but I wanted to be a reporter because it was about the story, not so I could be in front of the camera. One of the interesting aspects that I learned when I ultimately started shifting behind the camera is that I missed my time in front of it. And I had to kind of emotionally come to terms with um, I think I probably had to have some imaginary conversations with Ed Sardella. Didn't have him in real life. But Ed, yeah, I actually enjoy being in front of the camera, and I'm thinking of pursuing acting so I can just be in front of the camera. But yeah, then I started moving behind the camera. I started to direct. So that's probably where my career first expanded, was behind the camera as a director, producer. And then I kind of missed being in front of the camera, which is when I started taking acting classes.
Which is really interesting to hear somebody go the other way. I mean, you did have the experience a little bit in front of the camera, but then directing, then going back in front of the camera. But did you have an internal conflict having
Oh,
established yourself as a director and a producer, and now deciding to go back in front of the camera?
oh, I was to say I work in television film. We're all deeply um, paranoid and self-conflicted. That's part of that's part of the DNA of this business. So I think I had my own just internal conflicts. I don't think I necessarily. I think one of the I had a conversation with a casting director once as a director, and I felt like I wanted to advertise myself as a producer. So I told her I was a producer, and she just flat out told me, she says, "You're not a producer." She says, "Yeah, you produce." But she says, "You're a director, you're a storyteller." And that really for me was the one of the opening um things for me, is like, oh, that's what I do. It doesn't really matter if I'm in front of the camera or behind the camera or any of the other jobs. And there's hundreds of jobs within our industry, and they're all incredibly important and valuable, and we all collaborate together to create this story. But it doesn't really matter I what of those jobs that I do. It's all about a passion for telling stories. So
Yeah.
and that's where it's um like on my, I think on my LinkedIn, I basically list myself as director storyteller, because I think it's all about the story first.
And you know what? I think a lot of artists have shifted that way in the last, decade or so, of becoming less of the pinpoint director, producer, storyteller, actor, and more, or I'm sorry, I included storyteller there, but advertising yourself as a storyteller first and foremost
Oh,
to,
really? That part I wasn't aware of. I was aware of the hyphenization,
oh
that
yeah,
you
definitely.
are a director, producer, hyphen, hyphen, hyphen.
Yeah.
But I wasn't aware of the storyteller thing. So that was not me watching the industry. That was just me kind of coming to terms with who I am, I guess.
No, it seems like a like an internal collective decision that everyone is now more of a, we're more of a storyteller than just an X, Y, or Z, which I think it's great, and it's, created a lot of wonderful projects. So, with all of that happening and you really embracing your art, I do want to ask you about this shift, getting back in front of the camera. Was it jarring how much time had gone, by since you were really focused on that? What was
Hmm.
it like experiencing that after, really focusing on the storytelling technical side more than anything?
Ooh, yeah. Uh,
Or I should say, how did
we,
you
we,
feel
we,
about getting back in front of the
we could
camera?
spend 7 podcasts just on the first 10 months. So let's try to be a storyteller and condense this to a version that people will understand. I think, yeah, I don't know necessarily if there is a clear an easy parallel between being an on-camera news reporter slash anchor and TV film acting. So it is in many ways like it's in many ways just like any career change. Whether or not you are a dentist and decide, you know what, I honestly want to go into, novel writing, or if you are a teacher and say, I want to be a accountant, you do kind of have to start from the ground floor, and you just kind of need to learn what do you need to do, and you need to start studying, you need to start learning what the career path is and all the unique qualifications along the way. So I do feel like I think I'm probably in career number 4 or 5. I am collectively doing both career and 4 and 5 and maybe even 6 right now simultaneously. Um, but yeah, in each one there is this kind of, okay, we're starting over. There are, I think once you get deeper into TV film acting, I have been able to find some back channel connections to being on camera as a news person, but I don't think those correlations were apparent at the very beginning.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be a very jarring, pivot from one type of on-camera, performance, so to speak, to another. So with that, starting from the ground floor, were you looking at joining classes? Were you looking at, talking to friends who are, actors?
I'm gonna be particularly revealing right now. Not in um not that I'm coming out of the closet. But I just feel like it's an important part of the story. Um, so there was a lot of things that were going on with my life at the time. Ooh, we're gonna go deep.
Ooh, oh,
And not to make light of it through the tone of my voice, but I was suicidal at the time. I feel like I was in a part of my life that um, I was not finding joy in what I was doing. And so I was in therapy, and um, it's the classic scene that you might have with me lying on the couch, and you have this session there with a therapist. And then the therapist says, "Hey, okay, so we've talked a lot about your dad. See that dot on the ceiling there? That's your dad. I want you to have an angry conversation with dad, and tell dad all the frustration stuff that you've had." And I would do that, and I would just go, "Dad, ba da 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 da." And that same day, I would go to an acting class that my agent at the time told me, "Hey, maybe you should take an acting class." And in that acting class, that acting coach just said, "Hey guys, we're just going to work on anger today. And I'm going to we're going to improvise some scenes, and, um, you know, let's see if I want you to say something really angry." And I would go, "Blah, da, 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 da." It's like, okay, let's pretend on a scale from 0 to 10, that's a 4. Let's see an 8. And I go, okay. And I would just barf up all this pent up anger that had been in my body for years. And it just, after barfing up all that anger, I left that workshop going, I feel so much better. And um, so I kept on going back to acting class largely for years, kind of as weekly therapy. And that's really what it was. In all truthfulness, it was weekly therapy. And then I kind of, after a while, decided this is kind of fun. And, I was booking commercials. I was doing that, minor stuff. I was like, okay, this is fun. This is a hobby. And then I started to think about how this could be a career. And here's the other thing is, I felt great after acting class, after barfing up all this anger. And just so people understand, it doesn't really matter if I was directing all this anger that was built up inside of me at a dot on a ceiling, pretending it was dad, or if I was just venting this anger at another character in the room. You're releasing the anger energy out of your body. And so, after being charged, I don't know, $150 for therapy and what, $60 for even not even $60, like $50, $40 for acting class. I thought, oh my gosh, acting class is so much better. It's more fun. So I stopped doing therapy and just started doing acting. And so it was one of these things where I kind of fell into this career. I wasn't really thinking, okay, this is a career. I was thinking, okay, this is something that would be fun. And then started taking classes, started becoming a better human being for it. And then decided, oh, well, this would be kind of interesting to think about it as a career. And then once I made the decision about 7 years into classes, aka therapy, that this looked like an interesting career, that's when things really kind of exploded for me in that direction.
I I just want to say I cannot relate more to your experience in acting class than it being this form of therapy. Of having it could be a lifetime of stress, fear, guilt, whatever. Uh, but then you're placed in a 3 hour, 400 square foot room, essentially a session surrounded by people who don't judge you, that trust you and want you to, release everything into the scene, and it's not going to create any long lasting bouts, thank god. It's just a fun exercise, but I wanted to thank you for sharing that, because a lot of us right now who are taking acting courses, we feel the same way. It's you could put so much more into your character because you don't feel judged for it, and it's
Sure.
part of your performance. You're channeling it. So yeah, I've never felt more seen than when you said 7 years of therapy through acting. um but it's really cool that you not only were you continuously going back to class and using it as a form of therapy, but you were also, sounds like, honing your craft as well simultaneously.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, your resume speaks for itself. So
got, got an audition right after this. So yeah, hopefully I'll learn something.
well, as you're 7 years into acting classes, you're now exploring it as a possible career opportunity or career journey. What did you have in mind goal wise at that point? Did you have any inkling of, it'd be fun to work with this person, or it'd be great to be a series regular? Were you opening your world to those types of thoughts, or were you just kind of letting things come to you as they may?
Oh, there's so many directions we can go with that question. uh, I'm going to choose the most politically correct thing to say and say that I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And that I was just kind of falling my way into one thing until I realized, oh, okay, this is really happening. Um, and so I think that's where um, I think that's where the power of intention and focus really kind of um, are amazing little things, because once you decide on something, um, the gears of the universe just shift. And so yeah, I mean, I was booking guest stars, I was booking studio feature films, I was working opposite really minor. Most people don't know these folks. I'm not sure. Have you heard of Robert De Niro?
No, he's an up and
And
coming
Owen
actor, right?
Wilson and Ben Stiller. I mean, most people don't know these
No.
people. They're kind of, I mean, people think they're A-listers. They're probably more Z-listers. So yeah, I was working off of these really minor people, Naomi Watts, small stuff. And again, it wasn't until I started realizing, oh, wait a minute, what I'm doing is really um, pretty extraordinary, to have the privilege to work opposite De Niro and Sean Penn and Naomi Watts, and um, on major multi-million dollar kinds of projects, that I started to then decide, hey, what if we changed our focus? What if we said, let's do this? And then that's when it really started to shift. So I kind of lucked my way into some of the earlier stuff, and then it kind of took off. The other thing also that really was quite helpful, and just so everyone has a really clear understanding of what my story kind of is, I live hundreds of miles away from the nearest casting director. So part of my journey is being in the middle of nowhere land, where nothing is happening. And there's this, when you hear advice from back then, and even still now, it's like, son, you need to move to Los Angeles to work. And so I've been kind of manifesting this stuff from the middle of nowhere. But that's where the directing stuff comes in. That's where all these Emmys kind of come in. Is the fact that I was really fortunate to take a casting director workshop in New Mexico, which there's a lot of TV film work in New Mexico, for those of you who do not know. And New Mexico would be, just so everyone knows, I'm in Denver, Colorado. So New Mexico would be 500 miles to the south of that. And so, it's like, okay, cool. I'm learning a lot. I'm booking this stuff. Maybe I can do more. And so I did this casting director workshop. A lady by the name of Sherry Rhodes was the local casting director for an AMC show called Breaking Bad. And she used to do these casting director workshops largely because the acting pool in New Mexico at the time were complete newbies. They're folks who had zero experience. And in order for her to have a job, she needed to be able to fill out all these smaller roles on the TV show with local actors, because the production didn't have the money to fly actors in from Los Angeles for these small roles. And so it was almost a self-preservation thing for her. So she had to do these workshops with these actors to teach them, this is how you do a co-star role. So I took one of her workshops. At the time, she was not feeling well, so she brought in her an old casting associate. And just so everyone understands, there's the casting director. Her right-hand person is a casting associate. Pretty much does the exact same thing, but is not necessarily have as much experience. And then one level below that is a casting assistant. And so she brought in a gentleman by the name of Joseph Middleton, who started with her at one point as a casting assistant, then casting associate, and then he went off on his own. And then he later became head of casting for this really tiny company called Paramount Pictures. She brought Joseph Middleton in, and he's the one that said, "Hey, I know that you guys are in New Mexico." He didn't know I was from Colorado. And you can, hey, if you want, you can audition on tape. And he was specifically, it was 2009, and he was specifically talking about how, at the time, way back then, uh, MP3s and Napster was really changing the recording industry, and he was seeing that how small video files would be able to do the same thing for TV film. And so he was saying, "Yeah, put yourself on tape." And I was like, "Oh, I can work in Los Angeles?" And sure enough, he remembered me. He emailed me saying, "Hey, I've got this little film called Little Fockers," which is how I got to work with De Niro. Um, I'd love for you to read for a role. And because I'm a director that may have won Emmys, um, multiple, six, it was really easy for me to apply filmmaking techniques, right? It's like, oh, okay, just create a small little soundstage, right here in my wife's office. That's cool, right? And I knew all this, like, filmmaking is easy if you know what you're doing, right? There's only one rule to audio, one rule to audio. There's really only one style of lighting used on every single television show and feature film. It's called Rembrandt lighting, and it requires one light. And if you know where to place that light, you look amazing on camera. And I'm using it right now. Little, this is my lighting setup. And so I taped it and I booked it, and then I taped another one for him and I booked that. And so what I've been able to do is I've been able to build a career nowhere close to anywhere there's television film. So that's kind of my story.
And that being well ahead of the pandemic that would come in 2020, and self-tapes now being an industry requirement for the most part.
It is. I mean,
insane.
And here's the fascinating thing. I've been doing this self-tape thing since I've kind of started actually initially like during the George W. Bush era. Then it became one of these things where once I found out it could really happen in 2009, then I started to do it more specifically then. But the word self-tape did not exist. It was very, very much understood for you to audition, you needed to be in the room. I mean, that was the idea of someone taping was never even thought part of the equation. It was truly Joseph Middleton who kind of sparked this thing for me. I'm not sure he sparked it for the industry, but he sparked it for me. And so, yeah, for years I was booking pretty regularly, and there was no one was using the word self-tape. I think it was pilot season 2015. Yeah, pilot season 2015. So 8 years ago. I'm in a casting director workshop, and I didn't know the word self-tape. And I'd done casting director workshops earlier than that. And I just asked a question. I says, "Yes, if we're on location somewhere, do you mind? How do we handle that?" Because I was booking and I would be on location. And she says, "You mean self-tape?" I went, that was the first time I heard that word. I went, "Yes, self-tape." And they go, yeah, I guess we would accept it. I mean, if you were on location." I went, "Cool." And that was the first time I heard that. So the word has been around for 8 years. I've been doing this regularly in booking for 14, and really a little bit before that. And so, yeah, it's become the only way to audition now. And I now teach it. I now teach this class, which I'm going to challenge you, Tyler. You should take this, and then you can tell your your audience, what you feel, you think about these classes, because at the end of the day, people are actors are being asked to do something, essentially to be a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And it's really unfair. I mean, auditioning is so hard anyway. It's so hard. So hard. Right. And then then now you have to be a filmmaker on the top of that. And so one of the things that I've learned over time is that I actually think self-tape gives you an advantage if you know what you're doing. And so one of the things that we do is we teach classes, and I know there's a lot of folks out there that think they know what they're doing. They go, I got my ring light, I got my tripod, I got my little blue circle in my background. I know what I'm doing. I'm good. And I go, okay, seriously? Are you getting any traction? And they go, no, but I'm auditioning a lot. Like, okay, good. And and the reason why they may not be getting traction, some of them are doing great, and that's awesome. But I think what don't realize is they're not utilizing this microphone correctly. And there's only one rule to audio. And in my opinion, this being a podcast, audio is the most important thing out there. And if you know how to get it, it's where all the acting lives. It's where all the subtext, it's where all the emotion, it's where all the story lives. It's in the audio. Think about it. I mean, Tyler, it's a podcast, right? I know probably there's a visual portion of this thing. But it's a podcast, right? I mean, people could be just listening to this, on their phone, listening. Mm-hmm. Television is not television. Television is radio with pictures. Radio came first. You don't need the pictures. You need the audio.
Yeah.
If you just have the pictures, it's boring. Right? It's boring.
Yeah.
And so, so one of the things that we teach the actors, we teach them the only rule to audio. We teach them how to make it so they're whatever microphone they're using, whether or not it's their camera, or if we first of all, we don't ask actors to invest, because all you need is a wall, a window, and a phone. And so, but if you know how to use that wall correctly, and that phone correctly, and that window correctly, then you can get a much better tape. And that's filmmaking. Because a lot of times when I walk in as a director, I'm not thinking I want to bring in $400,000 with the lighting. A lot of times it's like, you sit there and you go, what actually exists here? Okay, cool. I got a window coming over here, so I'm going to motivate the light from over here. And I want to augment this. But, a lot of times I'm not going into a location going, let's relight the whole thing. A lot of times I'm taking what's already there and augmenting it to make it more beautiful, or maybe changing it so if it's going to be a scene that we need to shoot there for 5 hours, well, the sun's going to move. So it's like, okay, so the window's from here, so I'm going to put a light out there, so as the sun moves, the light never changes as we're shooting. But the reality is it's not about spending a lot of money or adding a lot of equipment. It is about knowing how that equipment works and using it in a way that will make you look and sound great. So that's kind of the stuff that we teach. And then the most important thing for those of you watching this is this camera right here. And it's the most powerful tool ever invented. Ever. And no one knows how to use it. And we've had casting around for millennia, maybe. I don't know. I'm guessing cavemen maybe did some kind of school play And so and they had to figure out, do we make Oog the lead or Umbwa the lead? Maybe they should audition. So we've had this casting process around for millennia, and only very recently have we added the world's most powerful tool ever created. And people, if you know how to use it right, have an advantage, and if you don't, it can be a massive disaster. So we kind of teach that as well, and that's kind of how I've been able to book, is because in many ways, I don't just do self tapes. I tell stories. That's the storyteller in me. I tell stories as a director with my self tapes. And I think
And
why my tapes work, and that's why my
yeah.
student tapes work, and that's why they're booking.
So with the classes that you teach, do you teach in person and online? Can our listeners find,
It's
your
only
information?
Zoom. It's only Zoom.
It's only Zoom. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
We have students in Canada, we have students in New York and Los Angeles and everywhere in between. Um, yeah, we have. I understand that you have viewers and listeners in Europe and in uh, Australia. I know we had a student. She's Los Angeles, but she took an immersion in France, so she was doing a class in France. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing, this little technology called Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved it for the last almost 3 years I've been doing this show. So it's,
I study with a Los Angeles coach because I can, because of Zoom.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of storytelling, I know you have to have something in your arsenal working with, small actors like Tina Fey and, Ben Stiller, but
I hope for the best for her, really.
yeah, I don't know
You
if
know,
we'll see. Only time will tell.
we'll see.
Uh, but I was wondering if you have what we call a party story on the show. So a story, an experience that stands out in your memory. It could be something really humorous, which is what we usually go for, something kind of tragic, as this industry is really known for, maybe a story of rejection, but something that stands out so immensely in your personal history that you could easily recant it amongst friends at a party.
I'm going to go with the story that I've told like twice yesterday. Um, it's a simple story, but it's something. One of the things we've been talking about, we've been talking about story, and I'm currently teaching the 201 class right now, and we just hit the story chapter, and I think it's so important because um, our entire industry is around story, and I have this theory. Sorry, actors, if I'm going to throw you under the bus, that we actors, I think partly because of the job is so self-focused, but we don't think in terms of story. We think in terms of it's all about me and what is my role and what are my lines? What am I doing? What is my motivation? And it's like, oh geez, please. So I tell this story. It's actually it's as a two-part story. So one of it, I'm wearing my director cap. One of them, I'm wearing my actor cap. So I booked this directing gig. It was we're going all the way back to in the teens, 20 teens, and I'm I'm supposed to go up there and interview some folks in Toronto. So I fly into Toronto, and I'm working with a particularly I'll just be nice, a producer that likes to go by the books.
Hmm.
So my boss likes to go by the books, and I am told that I have this list of questions that I need to ask. You know, and I'm pretty good at asking questions. I don't know. I might have a couple of Emmys that say that. So I'm like all excited. It's like, okay, cool, cool, cool. And what types of answers are you looking? Because a lot of times it doesn't matter what questions there are. It's like, what do you need for them to say? How are we shaping this story? What's the answers that you need? I'll find the questions to get those answers. And that was not going to happen. I needed to ask question one, then two, then three, then four, then five, then six, and seven. And I needed to go in that order. I could not skip forward. It didn't matter if they said something in answer one that was like, oh, cool, a cool follow-up would be answer question five. No, I had to go to two. And so, I get paid the same amount of money to do a great job for you or to just follow the rules. And so it's like, all right, this is one of these jobs where I'm getting paid to follow the rules. So I did my job. I asked every single person all the way straight through, and done. So immediately after that, I am cast, this time taking my director hat off, putting my actor hat on, to go work for an independent film called Everything Must Go. It stars this, again, kind of small-time actor named Will Ferrell.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard of him?
I think he was on some off Broadway show I saw years ago.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did a show called Saturday Night Live and The Office, and Anchorman 1 and 2, and small stuff like that. And so I'm working opposite Will Ferrell, and what I think was so fascinating is I land. It was shooting in Phoenix, and I get a call from Frank, the accountant, and it's like, "Hey, can I meet with you?" And it's like, "Cool." And just so people understand, when you work on location, depending on your contract, sometimes you get per diem, and per diem is just flat out cash they give you that you can use to, when you're not on set, you can pay for your meals. So basically, they're paying for your meals, whether or not you're on set or off set. And so it says, "Hey, can I meet with you in the lobby area, and I can get you your per diem?" I went, "Okay, cool." So I go down. I had the script in hand, and I'm reading it, and he finds me and he goes, "Oh, did you get to that one place with the surprise?" And I went, "I'm at the place where he just went to jail." And he goes, "Oh," and he says, "I don't want to say anything else. I don't want to ruin it." So I'm discovering it was such a relief that everyone associated with that project was focused on story, including Frank, whose job is to make sure all the dollar numbers add up. But Frank had read the script. And then I work a couple days later. I'm in hair and makeup, and Will walks in to the hair and makeup thing, and he's so excited. And then he's talking to the head makeup head hair person. He goes, "Do you see what I did?" And she goes, "What?" And she goes, "I didn't do anything with my hair. This is bedhead." And the scene that he was going to be shooting, one of the scenes that he was going to be shooting, Everything Must Go basically deals with this person who's getting a divorce. Will Ferrell is getting a divorce. Not Will Ferrell, the person, Will Ferrell, the character that Will is playing, is getting a divorce. And his wife kicked him out of the house, locked him out of the house. So he slept in the front yard on a lawn chair. And so the scene that he's shooting, he needs to have bedhead. And he was all excited about the fact that, hey, instead of doing my hair in the morning like a movie star would, and then going in the trailer and then having them mess it up to look like bedhead, I'll just wake up with bedhead and then walk in, and then they don't have to do anything. And so hair and makeup were thrilled. Will was filled. And that's where it's like, I developed so much respect for Will and Frank, the accountant, because everyone on that project was focused on the story that we're trying to tell. And it was such a relief from being in Toronto, where I had to follow the rules. And so I feel like there is this thing that I hope everyone at least hears is that we, if you're in this industry, hopefully it's because you love telling stories, and hopefully, we're in a collaborative environment. We're all working together to tell the exact same story because we're passionate about the story that we're going to tell.
Wow. See, I haven't seen that movie probably since it came out, but there seemed to be a very I don't know, just relaxed state to everybody that was involved. Is it like they really cared about it? There wasn't any showboating. Will Ferrell was doing his thing, but it was different, and you could tell.
And
You know,
here's the thing: it was a huge risk on Will's part because
yeah.
this was, I think, the second time that he had done a film that was not a comedy. In fact, I remember being in the theater watching the film, and a couple left, and they
Oh,
seemed to be. I couldn't hear them, but they seemed to be in a little bit of um, a tizzy. And I think it's because they thought it was a comedy, and it's not a comedy; it's a drama.
yeah.
And Will does a really nice job in a drama, which you wouldn't expect. But yeah, interesting enough. The We ended up improvising stuff. None of that stuff ended up making the final cut, but all the jokes were mine.
Really?
Will did not take any of the jokes. He had let me do the jokes. And so, yeah, that was a really fascinating experience just to watch him. And there's so many things that Will did on that shoot. He had a binder, which I have. I went out and bought one, and he had a script in there, and he had copious notes on his
Wow.
character on every single page. And I remember just looking at that, going, "Oh my gosh, he takes this craft very seriously. I have so much respect for him."
Oh my god. Yeah, you know what? The longer I read about the artists from SNL who, you know, left the show and done crazy creative things, they all of them have such a deep love and work ethic for the craft. It does nothing but impress me each and every
And
time.
it starts with the Groundlings. I mean, Will
Yeah.
is a groundling. Groundling, just so everyone knows, is a group, as an improv school in Los Angeles. I think it's the best acting program on the planet,
Yeah.
quite truthfully. And because they teach you story. Honestly, Groundling teaches story.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's such a phenomenal training ground. Yes, you learn how to be funny too, but all of comedy is structure, and all of story is structure. And if you understand the structure of story and the structure of comedy, um, then you can make anything funny, or you can make anything sad, or you can make anything nerve wracking. So, great deal of respect for that.
Yeah. Well,
And
with you
they're teaching on Zoom, so, you across the world can be studying with the groundlings on Zoom. You don't have to be in Los Angeles.
well, with you being a teacher yourself, I gotta ask you, do you have a piece of advice you could give our listeners that you've personally held on to?
Uh, that I personally hold on to. The thing that I would say is, if you're fortunate enough to live in London, or Sydney, where there's a lot of TV film production there, and there's a lot of really great coaches there. Awesome, that's great. But if you don't live there, let's say you live 1,000 miles away from Sydney, I don't know what that would be, Brisbane or something like that. Potentially take a Zoom class and study with the local coaches in Sydney. If you are, I don't know the geography. I'm going to just say something, and maybe Birmingham is like right next to London. If you're in Birmingham, and take a Zoom class with a really renowned acting program in London. But we're at a time and place where, kind of where I was at in the uh, aughties, the zeros of the 2000s, and wanting to work. Um, we can be utilizing this technology of Zoom, of self tape, and have the ability to to work and to study. And that's what I would suggest is the world is really flat because of Zoom, because of email, because of this digital platform. And I realized almost instantaneously once the pandemic hit. Just so you know, I recur on a soap opera called General Hospital, and I
I
was on
saw that.
at the time when they shut us down for COVID. So I really, really clearly understood the impact of COVID on our industry because it's like we're shooting one day and then the next day we're not. And Grey's Anatomy shut down and Station 19 is shut down. Everything is shut down at Prospect Studios. And so I immediately understood, okay, if this thing is as bad as it is, I'm going to start utilizing the Zoom technology. And I started doing casting director workshops a lot because I wanted to expand to New York. And at the time that everything was shut down, I mean, casting directors had all the time in the world. And so I was able to meet with some casting directors, and then Groundlings and Leslie Kahn and all these Los Angeles coaches started coaching online. And so for me, maybe it's not studying in Sydney, maybe it's not studying in London, but for me, it was the ability to study in New York and study in Los Angeles with really phenomenal coaches. So that's what I would say, to take advantage of this time period, because it's now geography doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's it's unfortunate that it took a pandemic for that to happen, but it was one of the greatest gifts of being locked inside for months at a time.
Yeah, and like the 301 class that I teach, there's the 101, 201, 301, and the 401. The 301 classes that I teach, once the actors really truly understand how to do self-tape really effectively, I put them in front of casting directors, so they can test their skills in a live setting. And we just this past week had a casting director. She lives in New York. She works with a casting organization, a casting company in Los Angeles. Her assistant is a Los Angeles gal on a show that shoots in Chicago. And that's our world.
Wow.
That's our world right now. And so she says, yeah, she has to live in all three time zones. But that's our world right now. And because geography is not as important. It is important, but it is not as important these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
But you have a really, really good self-tape. I have a student that just was on Broadway, uh,
really?
Broadway on self-tape.
Oh, good lord.
And it's the tape. It's the tape. She always had the talent. And here's I'm gonna make one quick pitch.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily, if your acting talent is minimal, a really good self-tape is gonna basically show that your acting talent is minimal. It's going to be a truth teller. It's going to reveal. It's going to be like you being in the room. It's going to really showcase what you do really clearly if you have a good self tape. And we there was a class that we had in March of last year. We had 10 students, and two of the students I could tell were like they had talent. And in each class, we have them do a self tape each week. Each week they do a self tape. And then at a certain point in class, I have them take their actor hat off and put their producer hat on. And I have them say, hey, okay, everyone, you had a chance to look at everyone's self tape. Who gets a callback? And the rules are real simple. If somebody says Sam and no one else agrees that it's Sam, it doesn't really matter. Sam gets a callback, right? It's like if you mention somebody, they get a callback. And these two talented actors never got a callback. Week one, never got a callback. Week two, never got a callback. Week three, they finally got their technicals figured out. Finally, they both got a callback. One of them booked. Week four, they both got a callback. The other one booked. One actor in very, very particular, I think it was her fourth audition ever. She's young, really young, I think 19. Fourth audition ever, she booked her first co-star. And so what a good self-tape does is it reveals to the decision makers all the decisions and character choices and relationship that you've created with your other characters in the room. That's what it reveals. So if you have immense talent or if you have a unique take on something, it's going to come across really clearly to the decision makers. And that because we're using these filmmaking techniques, which are, if you think about it, used on every single TV show and film. Why? Because the studio heads and the network executives and the directors and the producers want the audience to clearly see and hear and understand what the actors on the screen are doing.
Yes.
That's why these techniques have been designed over the century and a half that we've had television film, and we're just using these exact same skills.
And I don't think we've brought it up, but as we're gearing towards the end of the show, we always do shout outs and promotions. I obviously want to give a shout out to your classes, but is there anything else you want to give a shout out to as well? Let's start. What is your business called? So I can put that in
Well,
the show notes.
I've got several businesses, but people want to follow me on. I'm at scotttakeda.com. You can find me there. And find at Scott Takeda for Instagram and all that kind of good jazz. So there's that. SCOTTTAKEDA.com. The self-tape classes is my last name, Takeda Technique. So
Okay.
basically what I've been teaching and coaching, and I have several coaches that coach the same thing too. It's called the Takeda Technique, TAKEDA technique.com. If you want to take a look at my directing, go to takedaentertainment.com. There's a lot of websites, but I think scotttakeda.com and takedatechnique.com is basically how people can kind of figure out and
Yeah.
learn about.
Yeah. Okay. That's perfect. The whole time we've been talking about it, I just need to ask him which one is his self tape
Yeah,
business.
it's called the Takeda Technique, and
Perfect.
we've got two really good instructors, hopefully adding two more. All the classes sell out.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's really exciting. And our the actors are booking. They're booking and booking and booking and booking and booking and booking. So it's not just me. It's not like I'm this uniquely talented individual. It's just the fact that I know how to make whatever I have, whatever choices that I'm making as a character come through very clearly on camera.
Well, I may appear at some point in the future.
And then we have we have classes in the morning, we have classes in the evening, and if you appear, you have to tell your audience what you feel like you're learning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If there's anything that I've held on to the last 3 years, it's I want to continue learning. I need to keep adopting new techniques. But Scott, as we're wrapping up, I want to quickly say like thank you for giving me some of your morning and some of your time. I appreciate the three very shiny Emmys you have right behind you.
Three additional digits up there and there.
But it's been great chatting with you. I've known of you for years. We're in the same city for goodness sake, but never had a chance to run into you or meet you. So it's been nice just chatting with you. And I have one more thing before we end the recording, uh, which I need to ask a preliminary question. Have you ever seen Wayne's World?
I have.
Okay. Most people who've been on this show have seen it, don't quite remember it, but there's a sequence where Wayne leaves the new corporate set, and Garth is left to his own devices on stage and is left awkwardly mumbling and murmuring and almost kind of freaking out. So we like to
Don't
end,
remember the sequence, but okay, I'm with you.
you
I'm with you.
know, well, we end every episode with what we call an awkward goodbye, and
Okay.
it's in remembrance of that scene. So essentially, what I'm just going to do is give you a silent 3, 2, 1 countdown, and when I point to you, give me your best verbal awkward goodbye.
Okay.
You ready for that? You ready to be awkward? All right, here we go. In
Oh, mm. Oh, I need to wrap it up. You're doing this. This is wrap up. Okay. Um, hi. Um, well, for Taylor Rock, um, goodbye.